All right, everybody. Frankenstein, Chapter 9. A Sad Homecoming. It was 5 o'clock in the morning when I entered my father's house. I went straight to the library, telling the servants not to wake the family. I stood before the mantelpiece and gazed at the portrait of my dear mother, then below it, at one of William. I clutched my sweet brother's picture to my heart and began to weep. At that moment, my brother Ernest entered the library and tearfully fell into my arms. When we finally dried our eyes, I asked how my father and Elizabeth were bearing up. Father is managing well, but Elizabeth has been inconsolable. She'd been blaming herself for William's death until the real murderer was discovered. The real murderer discovered, I cried. How can that be? I just saw him last night on the mountain, and he was still loose. I don't know what you mean, Victor, replied my brother, looking puzzled. The discovery of the murderer has just added to our misery, since it was our devoted servant girl, Justin Moritz. Justine, I gasped. That's impossible. No one believed it at first. Elizabeth still doesn't. And actually, the evidence is very confusing. It seems one of the servants found our mother's locket in Justine's apron pocket, the locket that was stolen when William was murdered. Without coming to us with the locket, first, the servant went to the police. They immediately came and arrested Justine. Her trial begins tomorrow. I'm certain she's innocent, I argued, because I know who the real murderer is. At that moment, my father and Elizabeth joined us, so there was no chance for Ernest to question me about what I had said. After greeting me warmly but sadly, my father added to Ernest's explanation. We all wanted very much to believe in Justine's innocence, not only because of all the years she'd been devoted with our family, but also because of her love to your late mother and to William. I hope and pray she will be acquitted. We must trust in the fairness of our judges and our court system. Elizabeth waited until my father had finished speaking. Then she tearfully pleaded with me. Victor, you must find a way to help prove Justine's innocence. I love that girl, and I know she couldn't kill anyone. Certainly not the little darling boy she practically raised. Chapter 10. Justine Moritz, the second victim. My God. I went to the courthouse the next day with my father and Elizabeth. I wished more than anything that I could have confessed the crime to avoid having Justine punished for it. But I'd been in Germany at the time of the murder, and anyone hearing my confession would probably think I was out of my mind. The evidence against Justine was actually circumstantial. There was no real proof that she was guilty. She claimed that when she learned William was lost, she hurried to the town to help in the search for him. After many hours, when she tried to return home, it was after 10 o'clock and the city's gates were already closed. So she waited in a barn in a nearby village until daylight. She thinks she fell asleep for a few minutes until some footsteps woke her up. Justine had no idea how the locket from William's neck had gotten into the pocket of her apron. She could only guess that someone had put it there. But who? She begged the court. I don't have an enemy in the world. And if someone killed William just to steal the locket, why did the murderer leave it in my pocket? Elizabeth came forward to testify to Justine's good character and to plead with the court. But I saw from the angry looks on the judges' faces that it was of no use. They were already convinced that she was guilty. I ran out of the courtroom, unable to face my own guilt. I was responsible for creating the monster who had committed this horrible crime. A short while later, Elizabeth and my father staggered out, their faces white. Oh, Victor, sobbed Elizabeth, it's even worse than we expected. Justine had confessed to the crime. My father explained sadly. No, I cried, I don't believe it. Just then, a court clerk came out and called to Elizabeth. Oh, Miss Elizabeth, the prisoner had asked to see you. Elizabeth turned to me. I must see Justine, even though she has confessed. but I can't go in alone. Please come with me. I was tortured at the very thought of facing Justine, but I couldn't refuse. We found the girl sitting on a pile of straw in her cell. Her hands were chained together, and her head was resting on her knees. When she saw us, she threw herself at Elizabeth's feet and wept bitterly. "Oh, Justine," cried Elizabeth, "why did you lie to us? I was so convinced of your innocence, in spite of the evidence, but then I learned that you'd confessed to the crime." "I did confess," admitted Justine, between sobs, "but the confession was a lie. I was forced to make the confession. They told me if I didn't confess, I could never enter heaven after my death. I was so frightened that I did what they said, but now I'm miserable. I could never die with you believing I had murdered our dear, sweet child. I've told you the truth, and now I can go to my death peacefully. You know, and God knows, that I'm innocent." Seeing both women sobbing in each other's arms, I groaned in agony. I was helpless to comfort either one of these women, who were my dear lifelong friends. Even though Elizabeth and I both tried desperately to change the judge's minds, it did no good. At dawn of the following day, Justine Moretz was taken to the town square and hung as a murderer. With horror and despair, I now counted 2 of my loved ones as the victims of my blind ambition and of my terrible creation. What's the use of living? I asked myself in desperation. Suicide might be the answer for me, but how can I add more grief to the suffering Elizabeth and my father have been enduring? Then, too, I don't know what else the fiendish monster might be planning against my family. I had to protect them. I decided then that I had to shake off my depression and take action myself. I swore one day I shall track down this monster and come face to face with him. Then I shall make him pay for his terrible crimes. It's the end of chapter 10. Pretty good so far. Hope you guys are enjoying it. Stay tuned for chapter 11 and 12.